Hello everybody, good evening, welcome to the United Stands. I'm Mark Goldbridge and this is your latest Manchester United news as Erik ten Hag faces a transfer headache as Sir Jim Radcliffe faces more delay to be installed at Manchester United. Simon Stone, very credible BBC journalist, talking today about a 6 to 8 week delay before Sir Jim Radcliffe can do anything. Well, 6 to 8 weeks takes us well into January. How can we make any impact on the January transfer window? How can Erik ten Hag improve this misfiring squad if we can't do anything in January? We'll be talking about that. We'll also talk about something that was mentioned in the summer about financial fair play, which could, if done quickly enough, give Erik ten Hag £90 million in January that the Glazers have never taken advantage of because they don't like putting money into the club. So there could be a £90 million windfall. We'll talk about how we could do that. Also, a few players not for sale that were for sale in the summer, amongst them Scott McTominay, but a few others as well. And another big, difficult ingredient potentially added to the Everton game that will impact Everton, but also massively impact Manchester United's ability to win that game. We'll talk about that and a hell of a lot more on the United Stand. I'm Mark Goldbridge. I thought that was quite powerful to just give a bit of an intro but then I thought walking off's not the best idea. And also, big shout out to DJ United, one of our members, who literally said in the chat, you couldn't make this thumbnail up. And I thought, what's he talking about? The thumbnail says more delay. And then I realised I was 10 minutes late. So there we go. I should have put an ad in there, shouldn't I? Anyway, I hope you're all doing really well. Lovely time of the year. Not the most wonderful time of the year, but for me it is. I love November. October, November are my favourite months of the year. Dark nights. You open the window, you can smell the fires. Not because people are setting cars on fire, it's not like that around where I live, but because people are having fires, leaves on the ground, autumnal feel. I love it. And don't forget, Saturday all day, it's my charity stream. Please tune in for that. Even if you're just tuning in for half an hour throughout the day, make a contribution, but also just get involved. Keep me company. We do it every year. Anyway, let's get involved in this show. Lots to talk about, and we're going to talk about this Erik ten Hag January transfer setback. Simon Stone was talking today from the BBC about, obviously a lot of people have been talking today. I've done the video, I don't intend to go back on it, talking about Richard Arnold being removed or standing down or being sacked, whatever you want to interpret that, it's irrelevant, he's gone. But the point was that was within the article Simon Stone was writing for the BBC, he also said that although an official announcement is expected on Sir Jim Radcliffe imminently, it'll be still 6 to 8 weeks before he can, before the deal gets ratified, and he will not be able to contribute to the club's operations within that time. So, I mean, look, this is, I wasn't aware of this. I knew that, well, I wasn't aware of this, so I take it as read because it's been written by a journalist that doesn't make stuff up. BBC is a very, has to be nailed on in what they write. So 6 to 8 weeks from now is pretty much January, well into January. So what can we do in that time? Part of me says, well, we've just got rid of Richard Arnold, which wouldn't have happened if Sir Jim wasn't coming in. So we're doing stuff that's happening because of Sir Jim, but he can't do anything for 6 to 8 weeks. And it makes me think, yeah, prove we're not doing it. I still think we can do stuff, to be honest, but it depends how much of a focus the Premier League has on Man United doing things before Sir Jim's been, officially done everything. So it will have an impact, but it might not have an impact. We'll have to wait and see. But what I would say is the Glazers like saving money. And if this is an excuse not to spend in January, Sir Jim may as well not really start until next season, because what impact can you make if you don't make any impact on the January transfer window? Yeah, it's going to be interesting. But one thing I did hear this afternoon, and one thing that you got to be very, very careful of this. So financial fair play is very complex, grey areas. But effectively, I was listening to Kieran Maguire, who did an article with a transfer website in the summer. And he spoke about how you're allowed losses of £115 million over a 3-year period. But for Manchester United, they're only allowed losses of £15 million over the last 3 years because 90 million of that 105 million, 90 million of it is money that's allowable to be pumped into the club by your owner. And of course, the Glazers never do that. So you got me thinking, if you're allowed to put 90 million of owners' money into the club over a 3-year period, and we've never done it. Unfortunately, we can't backdate it because we could probably put about $500 million in over the last 20 years. But the Glazers haven't ever done it. So we've got this 3-year period where Sir Jim, if he finds a way, can get £90 million into the club. But I think it might fall foul of what Simon Stone is saying there. I don't think he'll be able to do it in the next 6 to 8 weeks because the Premier League will go, where's this 90 million coming from? Now, if the Glazers put it in, they'll be going, it's a bit weird. So there is ways to get money into the club, but it's just more delay, isn't it? I was talking about this morning. I mean, I feel like it's sort of death by submission in a sense, because are we just going to get delay and very little information and then Sir Jim Radcliffe's here? Because I don't know what's meant to be happening tomorrow or early next week then. Is it just going to be Sir Jim's buying 25% like we've known for nearly a month? We actually want the detail and we want to know what we're going to do. I mean, I will say this though, if we've got £90 million to put into the club, would you want to spend it in January? I mean, I'll do a poll on that one. Would you want to spend the 90 million in January, or would you keep it back and have a look at it in the summer? Because part of me feels that spending money in January is really difficult. You probably overpay, and the players that you really want probably aren't available. For me, I'd like to spend about 35 million in January on someone like Todibo, and then I'd leave it. Because you're not going to buy a top quality midfielder. You're going to struggle to buy a top quality anything, really. I mean, Chelsea got Enzo Fernandez and all those players because they paid stupid money, which we don't have. So, yeah, I think Ten Hag needs to do something in January, but I don't think we should be treating it like Chelsea did last year. I think you've got to do something. You can't do nothing, but I wouldn't go mad. And yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you look at the last 2 January transfer windows, we've basically done next to nothing. Would that be 90 million a player plus player sales, says Mandy? Yes, it would. So this 90 million that apparently you can put into the club comes from the owner's pocket, and you're allowed to do that every 3 years. So yeah, that would be bonus 90 million. I mean, it's quite infuriating because it would have been bonus 90 million we could have done 6 years ago as well. But typically we're owned by the Glazers and they don't do those sort of things. But yeah, I think we've got to do something in January. And if we do nothing, then we're severely hindering Manchester United Football Club and the manager, because that squad has got issues. So much so that Arnold wouldn't be gone now if Sir Jim wasn't pulling strings to some degree already. No official say doesn't mean no say, says Tom. I agree. Got a few things to get into tonight. Sir David Brailsford has apparently been to Carrington a couple of times in the last few weeks looking at stuff. Yeah, I would agree with that. And yeah, he will be pulling the strings. Of course he will. But just as an example of the January transfer window and how it's changing for Ten Hag. You've got players that were for sale in the summer that are no longer for sale. Like Scott McTominay's not for sale anymore. Harry Maguire's not for sale anymore. And that just shows you the enormity of the problem that Ten Hag has. Now, some people might say, well, that's a positive because McTominay's playing well. I don't think he's playing well. I think he's playing very, very average, actually. I think Maguire's playing well. I don't think McTominay's playing well. I think he's been below average, in my opinion, apart from the 2 goals against Brentford. Even the game where he scored against Sheffield United, I didn't think he played very well. So I don't think McTominay's playing well. I think he's average at best. But the fact that he's not for sale anymore, and the fact that Maguire's not for sale anymore, and yet they were for sale in the summer, what does that say to you? What does that say to you? I want your answers on this. What does that say to you if certain players who were for sale in the summer are not for sale anymore? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because I think it's a bad thing. Because I think, well, in the summer, the manager had just finished 3rd and got to 2 cup finals and he wanted rid of these players. Now, we're playing absolutely shit. His job's in danger and he's not selling them. Is it a drop-off? I think it is. I tried to make the losses point yesterday, Mark. Obviously not very coherently, as you kept answering with Newcastle putting in £1 billion, says Glennie. Thank you, Glennie. And also Sean Turner with a very generous super chat says, I mean, he has to go get that defender from his other team, and we need another striker in January. That could be the difference between us getting the Champions League or not. And if we don't get Champions League, the summer window is going to be awful, says Sean. Can everyone wish Susan, our mod, a happy birthday, says Sally. Sally, you're a legend for replying me to that, reminding me of that. Can we get a big happy birthday to Susan, one of our moderators? She's 19 today, apparently, but no, I don't know. I'm joking. I don't know how old she is. Now I've got into a dig in a hole. She's older than 19, but yeah. Anyway, we can't sell both of them, not for their performances, but for the fact that we don't have squad depth. And if they go, we will be crippled further, says Sackett. Exactly. That's my point. The reason McTominay and Maguire aren't available for sale anymore is because they're part of the first team, because we've got injuries. And also because if we sell them, we won't be able to replace them in January. That's the issue. We're again being too optimistic and not having the right conversations. So Jim will push for efficiencies and bargains, not real spend. Also, his control is a shame. The Glazers still own the club, says Humphrey. Some really good comments coming in tonight. Keep them coming in. It depends on what players are available in January. If we can't get the players, we don't want to spend, says Graham. Exactly. But Sean Turner makes a good point as well, and we've been in this position before. I remember saying this last year and the year before. They both fought hard for their places deserved, says Red Army. No, but that's not what I asked. And you live up the arse of Harry Maguire, Red Army. I know who you are. You need to change your username, because you'll say Harry Maguire is the best defender we've got when he's cost us a game. I know who you are. I've played the game. But that's not the question I'm asking. I'm saying, why aren't they for sale anymore? They're not for sale because Eric Ten Hag suddenly thinks they're part of his plans. They're not for sale anymore because the standards have dropped. And where he thought this team was going to be in the summer is not there anymore. And where it is now, people like Harry Maguire and Scott McTominay are important players, because the standards have dropped from where they were in the summer, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's my thought on that. But as Sean Turner was saying there about the Champions League, it's really important. Red Army is not Seb, Kyle. He can't write that well. And also, he's in bed. So unless he's got a secret laptop, which he probably has, knowing him. But you know what? Loving the birthday wishes, and Susan's in the chat, which is lovely. Happy birthday, Susan. Can you remember last January, under Ten Hag, where we were all saying, I mean, look, this is incredible. This is welcome to Manchester United, right? So this time last year, Piers Morgan interview with Ronaldo had happened a week or two ago. The World Cup had started. And we were absolutely convinced that we were going to buy a striker in January, because Ronaldo had gone, our top scorer and best player. What did we do in January? We bought in Wout Weghorst on loan from fuck knows where. So, yeah, shit show of a January transfer window when we needed it to be a good one. The year before that, Ranić had just been given the job after Ollie and needed players and wanted players to have a chance of top four. And we did bloody nothing. I don't think we gave Ranić anything, did we? I don't think we give Ranić anything. I can't remember, but I don't think we certainly. So the last two January transfer windows, we've completely ignored them. And if they ignore it again, then I think it'll go tits up, basically. The difference between United not getting into this next Champions League and being in it is north of 60 million quid. It's a brand new Champions League. There are a possible extra 4 games to the current Champions League system. So you're making more money straight away. This is not the year to miss out on the Champions League. And United, to be fair, to their credit, are keeping this on the down low. They're probably sort of like, it's really early in the season. We might be able to turn it around. But I'm telling you now, if United miss out on the Champions League this year, it's a huge blow. And 5th place doesn't look good at the moment. We've been talking all summer and for the start of the season that 5th place will probably get you into the Champions League. It probably won't, because Newcastle aren't going to qualify for the Champions League knockout stage. And if we don't qualify as well, the chances of us getting that 5th place is quite slim, because it's given to people who do well in Europe. So not being in the Champions League for Manchester United this season will cost us in excess of 60 million quid, which brings it back to the January transfer window again. And the Glazers have never figured this out. In January, it's worth spending money on players that will give you an increased chance of qualifying for the Champions League, because financially it will make sense. Whether we're going to do it or not, I don't know. I personally do not think Man United will qualify for the Champions League if we keep picking the team we're picking at the moment. I think the only chance of us qualifying for the Champions League is if we get people like Luke Shaw, Lisandro Martinez back, Casemiro back, Varane back to his best, and we start picking the team that we picked last season. And then I think we'll start winning more games, and we've got a good chance of fourth, which is open at the moment. But if we don't do that, I don't think we'll get it. So I think I would be looking at the January transfer window and say, we need a centre-back, and if there's something that's, appetising in the midfield or the attack, we should go for it. But if not, we'll have to wait till the summer. But you've got to take advantage of it. We can't just sit there and go, let's wait and see. It will go one or two ways. We'll either do something or we'll do nothing. And if we do nothing, it will be on the pretense that we need to assess. We need to assess and look at the future. And in turn, that will mess up the summer transfer window. Because one thing I've always said on this channel for years is, the great thing about the January transfer window is if you can do a bit of business in January, it gives you less to do in the summer. So if you know you need a centre-back in the summer and you get them in January, that's one less thing to do in the summer and gives you more time to do other things. If you know you want to get rid of 6 players in the summer and you manage to get rid of 1 in January, you give yourself more time to do more things. What United do is they condense everything into the summer, and then we don't end up getting everything done. So I think we have to do something in January, but it could come down to what money is available and whether Sir Jim Radcliffe is even in place. And also, let's not forget, the biggest factor here is not what I've just said. The biggest factor to do business in January is who's doing the bloody business. Who is doing the business? Because I'll tell you now, if I'm Sir Jim Radcliffe and the Glazers say to me, we're looking to spend £50 million in January, and you go, who's spending that then? Because I've not got my team in place. Oh yeah, it's Eric and John and the current lot. No fucking way. Stop that straight away. What do you mean? We need to get somebody in. No, absolutely not. Who are they trying to buy? Who are they trying to buy? Because if you haven't got the right director of football and you haven't got the right structure around the manager, don't spend anything in January without me saying it's okay. And will he have his team in place to do that? It's interesting. I'm very interested by what Simon Stone said today, that it could be 6 to 8 weeks and Jim Radcliffe's not allowed to get involved until then, because there has to be some conversations going on. If we do something in January, it's got to unofficially be ratified by Sir Jim. Sign a player or two who we believe can improve us. Surely Varane's injury record is a concern. An effective replacement of Van der Beek or Amrabat maybe, but we do need players who can help us improve. We need to get top 4, says Mojo. And I blame the incompetence above Ten Hag, unable to sell players and get his first choice targets, says Reece Smith. Wow, yeah, I mean, look, you look at this summer and what should have been. The biggest one was Kim Min-jae. He thought he was coming to Man United in April. We all did. Fabrizio did. And United blew it. And now he's playing at Bayern Munich. Imagine if we'd got Kim Min-jae. I mean, in some ways, can I just say, when we were linked to Kim Min-jae, I really, really did want him. But I was confused how it was going to work because Martinez and Varane. I've got to give Ten Hag credit. That Kim Min-jae signing was massively insightful. Because you look at it now, Martinez hasn't played really since April. Varane's form has fell off a cliff. So Kim Min-jae would have been starting as our best centre-back. It was massively, massively ahead of the game by Ten Hag. And it goes back to what I said about injury. I don't think we're unlucky with injuries. I don't think Newcastle are unlucky with injuries. And I don't think Brighton are unlucky with injuries. I would say to all 3 of those coaches, what did you think was going to happen after the most demanding season in history? And then you've got to play in Europe as well. What did you think was going to happen? You're paying the price of too many games and too many games last season. You were always going to get injuries. So I think Ten Hag predicted this problem at centre-back, but United gave him Johnny Evans. Just Sir Jim Radcliffe comes in with his own people doesn't mean we will still won't be able to be charged with players. I'd get a centre-back and a centre midfielder in January, says Dimitri. And sorry, Mark, but I had it with our club and their strategy. So we're going to throw gold on the street now and keep the rubbish. If Eric can't coach Champions League winners, he needs to go. Clear the deadwood, says Daniel Anderson. Well, I'll talk about Ten Hag in a minute because I was on the radio this morning and I got asked a question that sort of forced an answer out of me that I didn't like. And that was about Ten Hag's future. So remind me about that. I'll talk to you about that in a moment. But Sir David Brailsford has been reported by the Manchester Evening News today that he has visited Carrington a couple of times already, which poses the question, who is Sir David Brailsford? Well, he's a good friend of Ineos owner, Sir Jim Radcliffe. Do you have any hope for this takeover, says Nick? We've always got to have hope. I'd like to have belief, but you've always got to have hope. I think it's better not to spend. Look at what Chelsea did when their takeover happened. Their first signings were Fofana, Koulibaly, Sterling. No vision, says Chris. Well, look, who's Sir David Brailsford? So David Brailsford is the head of sport, really, for Ineos. So he's got his fingers in Ineos, Lausanne FC, the cycling. He's involved in all of it. And he's going to massively be involved with Manchester United. What's his pedigree in football? Not that great, really. Not that great. He is what I would describe as an expert in sport who has a very interesting strategy, which is about marginal gains, really. When he went into cycling, he spoke quite openly about how he basically analysed every section of cycling and made little improvements, even if it was just 1%. And then they add up across all the areas, and then it makes a big difference. So what he would look to do at Manchester United is break down all the areas and look for little improvements that then, when you put everything together, it's a big improvement. It could work at Man United. It could work. Because taking that marginal gains philosophy, if I go to the fitness department, there's some improvements you can make there straight away. Maybe 10%. And then you look at the coaching. Definitely areas there. We've still got coaches from Ollie and Mourinho's days. Transfers, yeah, there's gains to be made there. Fitness and conditioning, yeah, we've mentioned injuries, but, all that side of things, he'll be very, very good on that. Nutrition, there's probably stuff that can be done there. Commercial, PR, players doing too much, reduce that. And when you add all that together, you could make 20, 25% improvement across all areas, which should then lead to improvement on the pitch. So it's not a bad philosophy. It's not a bad philosophy, and it is what's needed at United. There are so many issues within that football club, and we're all very much aware of this. Imagine if Man United was a really good football club, but we just had a bad manager. Sack the manager, bring a new manager in, everything's fine. Imagine if Man United was a really good run football club, but the coaching was bad. Replace the coaches, we're a good football club. Imagine Man United was a really good run football club, but we didn't spend enough money on players. There's £200 million. We're better. But at Man United, it's not just one problem. It's a massive collection of problems, and it's all about infrastructure. So if someone like Sir David Brailsford's coming in and looking at that already, that's only a positive. What gains he can make are very, very difficult, because the problem with, if he's done that in cycling and other sports, that's fantastic. But it's not really worked at Nice. They're having a good season this year, but look how long it's taken, and is that sustainable, or is it a one-off? Because actually, I don't follow the French league that often, but there tends to be PSG and a different one every year. It does. It can be Marseille one year, Nice the other year, Monaco. It tends to happen in France. So is that a sustained improvement for Nice, or is it a one-off? And also in football, these marginal gains that improve Man United, that's all well and good. But how does it measure up to Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City, Newcastle? There is massive improvement that can be made for Man United, but will it take us beyond 4 or 5 other clubs that are well run? That'll be the question mark. It might just make us more competitive. Hi, Mark. My dog. Well, that's better. Well, depends whether you get on with your dad. But Liam said, I thought he said his dad just died, but he said his dog died. Debatable. We're not going to do a poll. Some people aren't close to their dad. They'd rather their dog lived. But Liam says, my dog died, not my dad. Just died. Can you please attend the burial? We used to sit together watching your streams, says Liam. No, just, I can be there. Just, I'll do this. Rest in peace, dog. Clip that, put it on a loop, turn the volume up, and I'm there. We're all there. I ain't got time to come to the burial of a dog. Sorry. I probably wouldn't even have the time to go to the burial. I mean, I wouldn't bury my dog. I'd send it to the vet, and then they send it to an incinerator. But and I don't want the ashes, because I don't think it matters. But some people do. The people go to funerals of dogs. Is that a thing now? I wouldn't be surprised. People start celebrating Christmas in fucking August. Yeah, look, dogs are really great, but yeah, that's coming down the road, isn't it? Funerals for pets. Imagine if we got just Vardiel this summer. His calibre would have been massive for us. I genuinely think Mancini at Roma would be good for us too, says Red Devil. I think there's plenty of good players out there. I really, really do. But look, back to that Sir David Brailsford stuff. There is improvement that can be made, and I think there will be improvement. But yeah, it's great. Rudolph the Red says dogs are better than a lot of people. To be honest, they are. They're definitely better than cats. What are dogs better than? Cats, some people. Yeah, definitely. It wouldn't surprise me, as we've gone into a dog chat now. Anyway, Brailsford did a lot for Ineos and Sky Cycling. You look at marginal gains when you're at the top. United need to take big steps. Sebastian, we're almost like mind readers here, because I was talking about that. And the marginal gains that Sir Jim Radcliffe made, Sir David Brailsford made in cycling were really important, because everybody's sort of competing in the same way. So you analyse every little thing and find these little 1% that add up. It's a bit like in F1, isn't it? Everybody in F1 is sort of the same, apart from these marginal gains that give you another tenth of a second. And, you know, in cycling and racing, it's very similar. But in football, they're not marginal gains at Man United. They're massive gains that can be made, 100%. So it'd be very interesting what he can do. It could fall flat on his face. It could be successful. He's not a football guy. He's a sports guy. And whether some of those things are transferable or not, we'll have to wait and see. Also wanted to bring this into the show as well. Don't know whether you've heard this. Don't know what you think about this. Could be good. Could be bad. Omar, thank you very much for your super chat. Did you see that Everton, and it is relevant to Manchester United, and I will say that thing I said on the radio today as well. I must remember that. Did you see today that... I want to have a stretch. Scooby-Doo. Oh, I do need a stretch. Today, it's come out that Everton are possibly likely to get their 12-point deduction by the end of the week. Now, if Everton have their 12-point deduction by the end of the week, they go bottom of the league with 2 points, because they've currently got 14. And they'd be 7 points away from safety, I think. Or 5 points away from safety. Guess who's going to play Manchester United tomorrow? Not tomorrow. Guess who's playing Manchester United next? Everton. So, yeah, it got me thinking that if that Everton points deduction comes in, that does make the Man United game harder, because that Goodison Park crowd is difficult anyway, riled by a sense of injustice and a team that feels aggrieved and needs to catch up would make that game much, much more difficult, I think. So just keep your eye on that. I think it's a difficult game anyway, but I think you don't want to catch Everton at home after they've just been given a 12-point deduction. But that is our next game, so keep an eye on that. Ash said it was a fake tweet, apparently. Well, if it is, whether it is or it isn't, it's still a possibility, because they are trying to move that 12-point deduction through quicker. And of course, Everton could appeal it, but just something to be aware of. Also, I was on national radio today, and I was asked a question about Ten Hag, and I wouldn't say they caught me out, because I'm always thinking ahead. But I sort of went down a road, probably haven't said on here, and I thought, well, I've got to say it on here. They were asking me about Ten Hag's job security. And I said, look, without a doubt, there is a movement for Ten Hag. If I told you now what the manager sacking odds are in the Premier League right here, right now, the favourite to get sacked is Paul Higginbotham at Sheffield United, who's about 3-1 with Sky Bet, and 2-1 with Paddy Power, and 2-1 with Coral, and a few others like that. But Erik Ten Hag is the second favourite to go at around 3-1. So, look, the bookies aren't always right, but there is a real movement around Ten Hag. And the last couple of games have helped him out, beating Fulham and beating Luton. But he is not perceived to be safe outside of the Man United fan base. Lots of people think he's close to the sack. So I was asked this on the radio today. And I said, look, I think Man United fans are very aware of this movement to sack our manager, which is always weird because as fans, we don't want him to be sacked and it's our club. So it's always quite odd when media and rival non-supporting Man United fans have a movement to sack our manager, because it doesn't really make sense to me, because normally when Liverpool had Roy Hodgson, I knew they were never going to win anything. So I wasn't saying sack Roy Hodgson. I was saying keep Roy Hodgson. So I find it a little bit weird that there's such a movement from the media and rivals to sack Ten Hag. That makes me think it's more of a reason to keep him. Because rivals and the media, if they don't like United, would be saying keep Ten Hag. So it's a really weird one, isn't it? There's like this massive movement to sack Ten Hag from non-Man United fans. And if I was Man United, I'd be looking at that and going, it should be the other way around. They should be telling us to keep him because they think he's crap. The fact that they want us to get rid of him, is that because they think he's a threat who's underperforming, who can be removed? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Anyway, I was asked about it. Mojo says, I did a rough maths. The wage savings we can do by selling some players and yet adding back the wages we would pay to new signings, we could save 77 million a season. That's 15% of our annual revenue. That would be a good start, says Mojo. I think that's exactly what they're doing, Mojo, with Varane and Sancho and Casemiro and De Gea. I don't want to say this season is a write-off and ignore January transfers, but with Sir Jim taking charge, shouldn't the focus be to establish the CEO, Director of Football, and stake out the footballing ideology, says Mr. Glenn Johnson. Look, mate, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think you make a great point. I will come back to what I was talking about on the radio. They were saying keep Ollie, says Danny. Yeah, they wanted us to keep Ollie because they knew he was crap, and now they want us to sack Ten Hag. 68% of you would spend 90 million in January, so you'd spend a lot in January. God, I'm glad you're not the Director of Football or CEO. I would not spend our whole budget in January. But going back to what Mr. Glenn Johnson said, in an ideal world, what you would do is you would spend... no manager in the Premier League is safe apart from Klopp and Pep, says Luke. What I would do is, if I could do this, I would freeze time for 6 months. Stop all games, stop all transfers, and let Sir Jim and whoever's taken over Man United reassess what's going on for 6 months. Because it's probably going to take that amount of time. And while you're doing that, no games can be lost and no one's doing any transfers. But, the perfect time to have done this would have been when COVID hit and we had no football and no transfers for 3 months, because you can really assess your club then. But football stands still for nobody. And I'm not wishing another pandemic on anybody. I'm just saying football did stop for 3 months. That would have been a good time for Man United to have a bit of a change in everything and reassess things. But we're not going to get something like that. And football never stops. So they need time to look at everything that's going on at United and assess things. You're right. And what's the point in spending big money on things before you've assessed everything? But that's what they're buying into. Football doesn't stop. When the season stops, that's when everyone does transfers. When the season starts, that's when everyone's playing games. And if you sit still and do nothing, you'll lose games and you'll miss out on transfers. So somehow they've got to find a way to be competitively making decisions from day one whilst also assessing the bigger picture. It's challenging, but that's the mess the Glazers have left. Varane 30 million, Casemiro 50 million, Sancho 40 million, all sold in January, plus the 90 could be good if January, if it was run properly, says Barrel Shark. Oh my God. That terrifies me. So you think you can raise 80 million from Varane and Casemiro and 40 million from Sancho, which is 120, and then you're going to use the full 90 as well, which is going to take us up to 210 million to spend in January replacing Varane, Casemiro and Sancho. Oh God. It's like a bloody traffic accident. It's terrible. Carnage. I would not want that. Do I not want that? How would you do that? 10 memberships gifted by Mojo. I think you've been playing too much Football Manager. Mojo's a legend. Thank you very much. I mean, look, how would you... It doesn't matter whether you've got 200 million or 300 million. How do you replace Varane and Casemiro in January? You don't. and then you've fucked any chance of the Champions League. It's the January transfer market is not doable unless certain situations present themselves. Like Gakpo was meant to leave PSV in the summer, and PSV were ready to cash in, but he had a really good World Cup. He wanted to go in January. There was this big break, and Liverpool worked on the deal, and they got it done. Todibo, Nice is a possibility for numerous reasons. That's the sort of deal I think we should be doing. Anyway, going back to what I was saying about the manager. Obviously, there's this big movement to remove Ten Hag. There are some fans in our fan base that want to see him go as well. And I was asked today, like, do you fear for Erik Ten Hag's future? And I said, yeah, I do. Because there is this big... He's basically walking on thin ice. And I don't agree with it. I don't think he should be on thin ice. I think that he actually should be on firm ground with patience and backing for the next year. Certainly through next summer into next season. If I was in charge, I would say no matter what, Erik Ten Hag starts next season and we give him the rest of this season and the summer to see if we can build the structure around him. That to me is a given. That should happen. But we're not living in that scenario for some reason, and I find it really, really weird. Quickest manager to 30 wins in Premier League history, apparently. Quickest Manchester United manager to 50 wins in our history, or there or thereabouts. And yet here he is in a position where his job is in danger. So I am worried about his future because I don't think we as United fans in the main put him in this situation where he's on thin ice. But he is on thin ice. We have to accept that. And I look at December and I go, we could have a really good December, but there are a lot of things that can go wrong in December. Like we just mentioned, Everton away is not easy. Galatasaray away, we've got to win. It's not, a lot of people think that's impossible. I don't think it is, but it's difficult. Newcastle away, they've got injuries, but it's still a really difficult place to go and win. That's our first 3 games back after the international break. 3 away games, all of them, where you probably wouldn't give us any more than a 50-50 chance of winning. Well, you flip a coin 3 times, 50-50, you've done really well if you get 3 heads in a row. So, really, really difficult start. Then Chelsea at home, who look much improved and have a much better midfield than us. That's 4 really difficult games in a row. Bournemouth at home probably provides a little bit of respite. Bayern Munich might not matter, might be huge at home. And then Liverpool away. And I look at that first 7, is it 6 or 7 games? And I go, oh my God. He's basically got to win 5 of those. And if he doesn't, that pressure's going to come piling back on. Everton away, Galatasaray away, Newcastle away, Chelsea at home. How many of those are you going to win? And if he loses 2 or 3 of those, he's in shit. Then you've got Bournemouth at home, win that. Oh, he's survived a little bit, but the pressure's still on. Bayern Munich at home, if they batter us, and then Liverpool away, that could just be it. We could be sacking another manager after Liverpool away like we did Mourinho. So, I think December is, I'm worried about it. Now, I sort of trust the club not to sack him, but that doesn't mean there won't be a huge movement for it if the results go badly. And I am worried. Somehow we've got to navigate ourselves through some really difficult fixtures that even under Ten Hag last year, we struggled. Like away from home last year, I don't think we beat anybody in the top 10. So it's a massive challenge with the amount of injuries that we've got, the way that we're playing. I am worried. But, and this is very dangerous what I'm about to say, I trust the club not to sack him in December. But that's a very dangerous thing to say to you trust Manchester United. We need plans for January, says FN. And I think that feeds into it as well. If we sack a manager in December, we're not going to bring in Zinedine Zidane or Hansi Flick or whoever else people think. It would be Darren Fletcher and Steve McLaren till May. So it would be worse without Ten Hag. If Sir Jim decides to go for the Ajax model from A to Z to stick with Ten Hag, then I'd be happy. I'd prefer to set a club model and as fail rather than restarting new projects every 3 years process, says Mr. Glenn Johnson. Well, I'll repeat what I said to you a few weeks ago. There is absolutely no appetite from Manchester United to sack Erik Ten Hag because they can't afford it. Now, I remember this with Mourinho and Ollie, and it really pissed me off because at that time it was towards the end and I'd made my mind up that we needed to change the manager, and I was getting very angry with a board and an owner that wouldn't sack somebody because of financial reasons. This time it's going to be beneficial because I don't believe Ten Hag should be sacked, but I'm very, very confident that they won't do it. I trust them not to do it, and the main reason I trust them not to do it is because I think that they can't afford to do it. As we've said before, money's too tight to mention at Man United at the moment, and if you sack Ten Hag and replace him, probably going to cost you 30 million quid, and then the new manager's going to want a few £100 million spending on him as well. And also, let's call out the elephant in the room. How can you sack a manager you've spent £400 million on in the last 12 months? You know, at some point you've just got to stick with your mistake or back the project that you've invested heavily in. And I think that's what's got to happen. But look, I will admit, December could be a bumpy ride. It could be a really bumpy ride. And it might have to get worse before it gets better. And it might be a really horrible, horrible season. There has been trigger points in the past that have led to people being sacked. Losing at Liverpool has been seen as the icing on the cake for Mourinho. For Moyes, it was when it was mathematically not possible to get top four. For Van Gaal, it was not getting Champions League football, even though he won an FA Cup. For Ollie, it was really because he just wasn't good enough and he completely and utterly lost the dressing room. So there are trigger points for losing your job at Man United, but December's really, really difficult. I mean, I'm excited about December. I mean, I'd much rather we were playing games than the international break, but there's some real challenges to come. A project longest in history, says Alfonso. Eric Ten Hag is learning on the job and will come good. The Prem is a big step up, says Andrew Thompson. Chelsea fans happy where they played the other day. They still conceded 4 goals, says Assassin. I'm worried about that Chelsea game. It's at Old Trafford and I'll always back us, but I think Chelsea look better than we do at the moment. Has Ten Hag not already lost the dressing room, says one. I don't think he has. I think he's going through some challenges in the dressing room, but I don't think he's lost the dressing room. Are the players playing for the manager? They should be playing for their own self-respect and the club, says Philip. But that's not always the way it is it? Hi, Mark. I'm going through my first breakup and I'm coping with you. Do you have any tips after a breakup, says Brandon. Yes, you got to take your time. Think a lot. Think of everything you've got, because you may still be here tomorrow, but your dreams may not. But no, you've got to take your time to grieve with anything, whether it's the loss of a dog or a relative or a relationship. You've got to give your mind and body time to be sad. And then whilst you're doing that, do things that can help you while you're sad, whether it's watch a film or take a walk or go out with friends. And then at some point, you've got to stop being sad and get back on the horse. And that does not mean paying for it. That means, getting back out there, because a relationship probably ends because it wasn't good for you, or it wasn't good for them, or it wasn't good for both of you. You just haven't realised that yet. So take the time and then get back on the horse. Don't go horse riding, Ladios. I don't literally mean go and get a horse. That would be catastrophic if you've never ridden one. You could really hurt yourself. I might have missed it, but generally speaking, how do you see everything with Sir Jim based on the news we have so far, says Shahin. Well, I'd like to read some of your comments on that. You know what? This is a true story. Just before I answer what I think is going to happen with Sir Jim, I used to be really good at horse riding. It's a little known fact. My family really are into horses, and I used to be very good at horse riding. I was a good horse rider, and I was about 9, and the person who did it will remain nameless, but they had a horse, and they said, you'll be fine riding it without a saddle and everything. And I didn't really think it was a very good idea, but I got on it, and it booked me off, and I fell off, and I landed on my face, and I smashed all my teeth went into my lips. I looked like Mick Jagger. I was like this. And I said, right, I'm never getting on a horse again. You can screw horses, not literally. And I've never been on a horse ever since that 9 years. I was 9 years age. I've never been on a horse since it. And I used to be very good. I probably could have won an Olympic gold. Anyway, back to that question from Shahin. What was the question again? What do you generally how do you see everything working out with Sir Jim? Well, honestly, and we've been together for a long time. Not me and Shahin. No big reveal coming there. I mean, as a community, we've been together for a long time, and I think 99 times out of 100, we can predict a scenario, whether it's a signing, a sale, a season, a cup run. We can predict it. I can't predict this. I can't predict this. I really can't. Yeah, I can't predict this, and I wouldn't want to predict it because I'd be talking complete and utter fantasy. I do not know what's going to happen. All I know is there's a lot of people putting out information that's coming from the Glazers, and it's been very credible. And there's a story saying that Sir Jim's going to buy 25%, and Richard Arnold's been sacked. And that's all I know. So you're almost asking me to solve a puzzle that's a 1,000-piece puzzle, and you've given me 3 pieces, one from the bottom left, one from the top right, and one from the top left. I can't complete that puzzle. They're just 3 pieces that don't correlate. So I've got no idea. And all these people that are going, oh, yes, the revolution starts now, or this is the worst thing that's happened since the Glazers bought us. And they're 2 extremes, people saying it's really great, people saying it's really bad. Let's be honest, they're talking absolute rubbish. We don't have any information to know how this is going to work. What we do have is that archway, which is very high, that is Sir Jim is working with the Glazers, and I hate that. That's all I know at the moment. So I'm worried, concerned, but willing to listen, I suppose, because I've got no other choice. The option I wanted, I lost. But there is absolutely no detail out there to go, I'm optimistic. All we've got is 2 or 3 pieces of a massive puzzle. And we won't have the answers when it gets announced anyway, because let's be honest, when people announce they're buying the local pub and they get on Facebook and they say, we're reopening in 2 weeks, it's going to be refurbished with a new vibe and a new feel, come down, you'll love it. And you go down there and they've completely ripped out all the heritage and, you know, coziness of a pub and turned it into a sports bar in a little village. No one will ever go. So we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen yet, and anybody who's predicting it is basically pissing in the wind. They just don't know. Did you hack up like Dettori or do jumps, says Jack? I could do both. Yeah. I was a talented horseman. Mark, thoughts on what they said on the overlap today? They say Pep would do a good job at Manchester United. Talking out their arse. Don't know who said it. Could have been Roy, could have been Gary, could have been Jamie. But they're talking out their arse. Pep Guardiola would not succeed at Manchester United, and what that is a subtle dig at Ten Hag, because I've always said Pep Guardiola would not succeed at Manchester United, and I will give you the reason. Pep Guardiola would not be successful at Manchester United because we've got next to no players that can play the way he wants to play. We haven't got an open checkbook, and also, most important of all, he would have to build that club from top to bottom over a 4 or 5 year period, which he's never done. Pep Guardiola goes into clubs that he can make work straight away, that have the foundations of a Pep Guardiola team that he can add little bits to. Barcelona, he inherited it and added to it. Bayern Munich, he inherited it and added to it. Man City, he inherited it and he added to it. Man United with Pep Guardiola, anyone who says that Man United with Pep Guardiola would work hasn't actually watched Pep Guardiola's career. He's one of the greatest managers we've ever had, but he has a very distinctive blueprint, and it's not going into a club that's broken from top to bottom and rebuilding it. It's not what he does. And if you say it would work, there's no evidence to say it would work. Imagine you gave Pep Guardiola the job. We know what great football he plays. We know what great teams he's had. What's he going to do with those players? What's he going to do with that structure? What's he going to do with the Glazers? It's a recipe for disaster. He wouldn't take the job. So actually, anybody who says that Pep Guardiola would do a good job at Man United, it's like saying Santa would be a lovely father. You've got no chance. Absolutely no chance, because he wouldn't take the job. He wouldn't take the job. So yeah, it's completely it's a load of nonsense. And I actually don't think anybody would succeed at Manchester United, because you'd be forcing them to take a job they don't want to do, and then they wouldn't do very well at it either. It's fantasy. It's absolute fantasy, and I can't live in that world. We need to live in reality. We're in a real world now. Like Simon says, honestly, who could do a job? Shane Moran, you don't need to unsubscribe. I've got rid of you. He'd fail with the owners we have, says Tony. Shane is a Pep fan and says, I'm going to unsubscribe because you're talking nonsense. I've literally just spoken sense. I've broken it down. I've just upset you because you probably don't like Ten Hag and you think we can sack the manager and bring a new manager in and everything will work. You're the problem, Shane, and you're like. Anybody who thinks let's sack another manager because this job's easy must have been sticking your head back up your... No, I'm not going to say that. That's not fair on your mum. Pep would succeed in United. Well, tell me why he'd succeed. Don't just type he would succeed, because you're just the same as the people who go Messi's better than Ronaldo or Ronaldo's better than Messi. We're better than this. We're better than this. We've been better than this for years. We're not just submissive, idiotic football fans who lap up the bullshit from the media. We're better than this. We don't sit there having conversations about Pep would do a good job at Man United anymore, because we analyse the reality, and we know that that's not the case. You can't just sit there and go, Pep would do a good job at Man United. Tell me why he'd do a good job at Man United, because I've just told you why he wouldn't. Get in the real world. This is not a job that a new manager comes in and is successful at. We've tried numerous different managers. Jose Mourinho is the best. Jose Mourinho is a manager who will go down in history as one of the greatest ever. He couldn't do the job because he wasn't able to do the job he wanted to do. How can you do a good job when you're not allowed to do it? This is what I don't understand about some of our fans. Oh, Pep would do a good job at United. Zidane would do a good job at United. Klopp would do a good job at United. No, he bloody wouldn't. Because they wouldn't be allowed to do a good job. It's not... What you've got to understand is, it's not just the manager that fails when they take the Man United job. Mourinho didn't just fail because he's Jose Mourinho. Mourinho failed because the structure around him failed him. The same with Ralf Rangnick. The same with Louis van Gaal. The same with Ten Hag now. It's the club that poisons and ruins the manager. How the fucking hell is Pep Guardiola going to come into Manchester United and be successful when everything's around him to make him not be successful? Pep has failed to do the job he was brought in for. That was to fill the Etihad, says Stephen. Well, he'd fill Old Trafford. He'd definitely fill Old Trafford. So Jim went from 69% to 50% to 25%. So defo Sir Jim knew that and had to change his only way into United. We have spent just as much as Man City. Pep would have us competing for major titles, says the Ferocious. Yeah, okay. Because the manager negotiates the transfers. The manager buys the players. If you're not intelligent enough to make a comment, I wouldn't do it, because you're just going to get exposed now. What's the big problem at Man United? We don't buy the players the manager wants, and we overpay on them. So when you say Pep Guardiola would be successful because we've spent the same amount of money as Man City, you're not listening when I say it's not the manager that's the problem most of the time. It's the structure behind him. So when Pep Guardiola asks for Erling Haaland and ends up with Wout Weghorst on loan, how the fuck is he going to be successful? What your brains are not telling you is that if you give Pep Guardiola the job over the last 6 years, he fails like everybody else because he wouldn't have the players to play the way he wants to play, and he wouldn't get the players he wanted to buy. He'd get overpriced shit that was way down his list. Like, if you're going to make a point, know your football club. Because we've had numerous managers who wanted A or B and got F or E for double the price. Know your club before you start talking nonsense. You're acting like Pep Guardiola would come into the club, be the director of football, the CEO, the coach, the fitness guy, the scout, the negotiator. Like, that's not how it works. Until you... this is why people want Ten Hag out. I've had an epiphany tonight, and it's almost Christmas. I'm figuring it out now. People want Ten Hag out because they talk like Shane. They genuinely think there is a manager that comes in and spends the money better, that coaches the team better, that sorts the fitness out better, that does the scouting better. But they've got absolutely no idea how a football club runs or how Manchester United runs. The football club has to have structure. You've got to have a good CEO, a good director of football, good scouts, good fitness department, good coaches, good players, and it's all got to fit into the vision of the manager. We've never done that. We've never done that since Sir Alex Ferguson left. And until we do that, no manager will succeed. Yeah. It's a failure of a football club, and it's going to take a very long time to build it back, in my opinion. What will Man United look like under Sir Jim? I don't think anyone can answer that question in the bottom left-hand corner because I don't think we have the detail. And I think time, unfortunately, will reveal the truth. I don't know. I don't even know what success is under Sir Jim. I mean, let's take the best case scenario. Sir Jim is successful at Manchester United. What is that success? It might be third place every year and a domestic trophy. Is it even achievable under his model to win Champions Leagues and Premier Leagues when you've got Newcastle and Man City in the league? Has anybody ever thought about that? Has anybody actually figured out how, if Sir Jim Radcliffe is successful with the Glazers, he actually gets anywhere near Man City? A club that's just posted record revenues in excess of 700 million quid. I don't even know how they do that. How do Man City post record revenue? I know they won the treble, but they ain't got hardly any fans. How are they doing that? And they're super rich. Their revenue's going up. They sell really high. They can spend shitloads of money because their revenue's high and their FFP's low because they sell loads of players as well. So they can keep spending 100, 200, 300 million pounds every summer. How do you even get close to that? We spend a lot of time talking about our revenue and our wages and our spend, and it's a very small gap to buy players. Man City's is like that. And they've just won a treble and they're rich. How do you even compete with that? How does success for Sir Jim even get close to that? Or what Newcastle are about to do? So that question in the bottom left-hand corner, what will United look like under Sir Jim? Even if he does a good job, we might still be miles and miles and miles off Man City and Newcastle, because what is his good job? We don't know what it is. Pep's good, but he's never done a full rebuild with limited resources. Eric was braver than Pep as he took on the challenge, says Martin Saunders. This show went from, I would say, an 8 to a 10 in the last 15 minutes. Absolutely incredible. Brilliant show. I have to applaud you all massively. It's just ended up... This always happens on the international break. We end up having brilliant 8 o'clock shows. Brilliant show. Legends. Even Shane, who fucked off. Great show because you started it. Sometimes the Pratt comment is actually the genius comment because it takes the show up a level. And I love the last few minutes. Sakin is curious. Well, you need to, that's fine. Oh, it's a football question. How are Arsenal and Liverpool successful without having rich owners? What are they doing differently? Well, they are rich to a certain extent. Spending £100 million on Declan Rice is a lot of money. Spending 80 million quid on Darwin Núñez is a lot of money. Liverpool and Arsenal are better run football clubs. They have money, they have wealth, but they've got better director of footballs, better CEOs, better visions, better managers, and they've got a support network around their manager. I think that answers it better. If Man United had a good CEO, a good director of football, and a structure around a manager that supports a manager. I mean, look, Arteta was an inexperienced coach who was allowed to get rid of Aubameyang and Ozil. Like, he's been backed 100%. He's been allowed to bring another goalkeeper in when he already had a good goalkeeper. Jurgen Klopp has been backed where they've been able to back him. Like, the structure around those two managers is why they're successful. And until we have that structure, we won't be successful. Thanks everyone for watching. You are legends. I've loved the show tonight. We're back tomorrow morning. Make sure you smash a like and subscribe. Do not forget, Saturday all day stream and into the early hours, raising money for people with terminal illness. I do it every year on the November international break. It is this Saturday, and I'm looking forward to spending it with you. I've got a better setup this year as well. Like every other year, I've got I can play computer games and I have a TV. But this year, I've got a better setup. So film watch-alongs and stuff like that, everything's on the table for that charity stream. So join in. People think it's EAFC if they think Pep would work, says Ben. Well, I think the comment section's going to be on fire tonight. Get your comments in below. I'll speak to you all in a bit. Take care. Thank you.